You know, it makes me very sad to see that a first-party publisher ends up doing this just because they only want to go for what they think is necessary for their future. However, doing this is only going to hurt them in the long term if this is what they are going for. Hey, what's happening, guys? This is RRPG here, and I'm here to present another 2 cents video on the 2 cents block to you all. It really has been quite a while since I have done one of these, but for a case such as this, it really makes me see this as a detriment. What am I talking about, you might ask? Well, in case if you were living under a rock, first of all, hello. Nah, I'm just kidding. Anyway, what I'm really talking about is this new report from Jason Schreier on Bloomberg, where he got an inside look at the PlayStation brand's plans for the future at the cost of their overall morale and the company's culture. You can probably see where I'm going with this, as this is not a smart thing with what Sony is now doing for the PlayStation brand. This is all thanks to the company's current president named Jim Ryan, and if you ask me, he's a guy who is the amalgamation of the former head of the Xbox division, Don Mattrick, and Activision Blizzard's current president and CEO, Bobby Kotick. If you know my stance on Bobby Kotick from within the past, then you'll know how very discontent I am with this guy. Anyway, the news article talks about how the PlayStation brand is only dedicated to only delivering AAA quality blockbuster titles from their first-party studios instead of being extremely diverse in everything else because of how games like The Last of Us Part 2 was a global smash hit from last year. Unfortunately, Sony wants to continue down this path, deliver just games that are blockbuster titles from just their Western game development divisions, and not give a rat's ass about delivering small to middle-scale games to fill in the gaps. This new initiative has made it to where Sony Ben's newest pitch for a sequel to Days Gone ended up getting constantly rejected by their parent company, and the output on their games from their Japanese game development studios is far more restricting than ever before. I'll read off the whole article and give my honest opinion about this because none of it is positive. After all that, I have so much to rant about when it comes to this whole thing. If you want to hear my honest opinions, go to this timestamp in the video player or you can click on the link in the description. Sony Corp's Visual Arts Service Group has long been the unsung hero of many hit PlayStation video games. The San Diego-based operations helps finish off games designed at other Sony-owned studios with animation, art, or other content in development. But about 3 years ago, a handful of influential figures within the Visual Arts Service Group decided they wanted to have more creative control and lead game direction rather than being supporting actors on popular titles such as Spider-Man and Uncharted. Michael Mumbauer, who took over direction of the Visual Arts Service Group in 2007, recruited a group of about 30 developers, internally and from neighboring game studios, to form a new development unit within Sony. The idea was to expand upon some of the company's most successful franchises, and the team began working on a remake to the 2013 hit The Last of Us for the PlayStation 5. But Sony never fully acknowledged the team's existence or gave them the funding and support needed to succeed in the highly competitive video game market, according to people involved. The studio never even got its own name. Instead, Sony moved ownership of The Last of Us remake to its original creator, Naughty Dog, a Sony-owned studio behind many of the company's best-selling games and an HBO television series in development. Deflated, the small group's leadership has largely disbanded, according to interviews with 8 people familiar with the operation. Many, including Mumbauer, have left the company entirely. Mumbauer declined to comment, and others asked not to be named, discussing private information. A representative for Sony declined to comment or provide interviews. The team's failure highlights the complex hierarchy of video game development, and in particular, Sony's conservative approach to making games for the PlayStation 5. The Japanese conglomerate owns about a dozen studios across the world as part of its PlayStation Studios label, but in recent years, it has prioritized games made by its most successful developers. Studios such as Santa Monica, California-based Naughty Dog, and Amsterdam-based Guerrilla Games spent tens of millions of dollars to make games with the expectation that the investments will pay off exponentially. And they usually do. Hits including 2018's God of War and 2020's The Last of Us Part 2 are exclusives to PlayStation consoles, helping Sony sell some $114 million of the PlayStation 4. Rival Microsoft Corp has taken the opposite approach, relying on a wide array of studios to feed its Netflix-like subscription service, Xbox Game Pass, which allows users to pay a monthly fee for unlimited access to a variety of games. Sony's focus on exclusive blockbusters has come at the expense of niche teams and studios within the PlayStation organization, leading to high turnover and less choice for players. Last week, Sony reorganized a development office in Japan, resulting in mass departures of people who worked on less well-known but acclaimed games such as Gravity Rush and Everybody's Golf. The company has informed developers that it no longer wants to produce smaller games that are only successful in Japan, Bloomberg has reported. This fixation on teams that churn out hits is creating unrest across Sony's portfolio of game studios. Oregon-based Sony Bend, best known for the 2019 open-world action game Days Gone, tried unsuccessfully to pitch a sequel that year, according to people familiar with the proposal. Although the first game has been profitable, the development had been lengthy and critical reception was mixed, so a Days Gone 2 wasn't seen as a viable option. Instead, one team at the studio was assigned to help Naughty Dog with the multiplayer game, while a second group was assigned to work on a new Uncharted game with supervision from Naughty Dog. Some staff, including top leads, were unhappy with this arrangement and left. Ben's developers feared they might be absorbed into Naughty Dog, and the studio's leadership asked to be taken off the Uncharted project. They got their wish last month, and are now working on a new game of their own that will be a part of a brand new franchise. Emphasizing big hits can also be counterproductive because sometimes games that start small can turn into massive successes. In 2020, Sony didn't put much marketing muscle behind the quirky video game creation system Dreams by the PlayStation-owned Media Molecule in the UK. As a result, PlayStation may have missed out on its own version of Roblox, a similar video game tool. Parent company Roblox Corporation went public this year and is now valued at $45 billion. For their first solo project, Mumbauer and his crew wanted to pitch something that would be well received by their bosses at Sony. Recognizing the risks and expense involved with developing a new game from scratch, they decided to focus on remaking older games for the new PlayStation 5. Remakes are considered a safe bet, since it's cheaper to update and polish an old game than it is to start from scratch, and they can be sold both to nostalgic old fans and curious new ones. The team originally planned on a remake to the first Uncharted game, released by Naughty Dog in 2007. That idea quickly fizzled because it would be expensive and require too much added design work. Instead, the team settled on a remake of Naughty Dog's 2013 melancholic zombie hit, The Last of Us. At the time, Naughty Dog was in the thick of development on the sequel, The Last of Us Part 2, which would introduce higher fidelity graphics and new gameplay features. If Mumbauer's crew remade the first game to have a similar look and feel, the two games could be packaged together for the PlayStation 5. In theory, this would be a less expensive proposition than remaking Uncharted, since The Last of Us was more modern and it wouldn't require too many gameplay overhauls. Then, once Mumbauer's group had established itself, it could go on to remake the first Uncharted game and other titles down the road. But pivoting from doing finished work for other games to making your own is difficult, since original development teams are competing against hundreds of other teams from all over the world, with varying levels of experience and successes, said Dave Lang, founder of Iron Galaxy Studios, which has served as a support team and a development studio. The people funding the work are often risk-averse, and if they have to pick between a team that's done it before and someone trying to do it on their own for the first time, I can see why some people pick the prior developer over the latter, he said. That's just what Sony did. Mumbauer's project, codenamed T1X, was approved on a probationary basis, but Sony kept the team's existence a secret, but refused to give them a budget to hire more people, leading many to wonder if the company was really committed to letting the team build a new studio. Still, the small team kept working, and by the spring of 2019, they had completed a section of the game designed to showcase how the rest would look and feel. At that time, Sony was going through a management shuffle, and the new boss wasn't impressed. Herman Hulst, the former head of Guerrilla Games, was named head of the PlayStation Worldwide Studios in November 2019. He thought the remake project was too expensive, according to people familiar with the matter, and asked why the planned budget for T1X was so much higher than remakes Sony had made in the past. The reason was that this one was on a brand new graphical engine for the PlayStation 5. Mumbauer needed to hire more people to help rework the graphics on new technology, as well as redesign gameplay mechanics. Holst wasn't convinced, the people said. Just when it hoped to enter production on the remake of The Last of Us, Mumbauer's team got called in to help when another big game fell behind. Release of The Last of Us Part 2 had been pushed to 2020 from 2019, and Naughty Dog needed the Visual Arts Service Group to polish it off. Most of Mumbauer's team, along with some of the 200 or so other staff at the Visual Arts Service Group, was assigned to support Naughty Dog, slowing down progress on its own game. Then the roles got reversed. Sony sent word that after completion of The Last of Us Part 2, some people from Naughty Dog would help out with T1X. Mumbauer's team saw this as their short-lived autonomy being stripped. Dozens of Naughty Dog staff were joining the project, and some had actually worked on the original The Last of Us, giving them more weight in discussion about T1X's direction. The game was moved under Naughty Dog's budget, which Sony gave more leeway than the Visual Arts Service Group. Soon, it was apparent that Naughty Dog was in charge, and the dynamics returned to what they had been for the last decade and a half, the Visual Arts Support Group aiding another team of developers rather than leading. To Sony, the move made sense. Naughty Dog is one of the key studios for Sony's ability to sell PlayStations, said Bloomberg intelligence analyst Matthew Canterman. Sony's competitive advantage has always been exclusive content over Microsoft, and more new games as well as remakes of classic titles from such a storied team can help sustain demand for the PlayStation 5. But those who had wanted independence were disappointed. By the end of 2020, most of the T1X team's top staff had left, including Mumbauer and the game's director David Hall. Today, the T1X project remains in development at Naughty Dog, with assistance from Sony's Visual Arts Support Group. The future of the remainder of Mumbauer's team, which has come to be jokingly referred to as Naughty Dog South, remains unclear. With all that said, I finally read everything word for word in the article, and what was all being said really makes me discontent about the PlayStation brand's future. Being only fixated on this new direction is going to become Sony's Achilles heel in the long term. I mean, I get it. Sony is a worldwide company, as the PlayStation brand is the main reason why they are still in business for today, and they are looking into many avenues with how to sustain their business. Games like Marvel's Spider-Man, The Last of Us Part 2, the 2018 God of War game, and Horizon Zero Dawn have become big hits within the past few years that Sony wants to continue giving bigger focus for the likes of Insomniac Games, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, and Guerrilla Games, just so their games can continue to sell gangbusters and earn Sony back those profits. However, what Sony and Jim Ryan don't even realize is that having other games like Days Gone, The Ghost of Tsushima, Gran Turismo, Gravity Rush, Everybody's Golf, Puppeteer, and many others is what makes many people fondly remember the PlayStation brand for what it is, and not just the big guys. I've been on the PlayStation bandwagon ever since the original PlayStation, and I look at the magnitude of games that came under Sony's stamp, such as the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, the Spyro the Dragon trilogy, the Siphon Filter trilogy, Parappa the Rapper, Gran Turismo 1 and 2, Wild Arms 1 and 2, the Twisted Metal games, Ape Escape, and many others that you left yourself as an icon and a competitor in the video game industry. That trend continued with the PlayStation 2 when you had big hits such as the Jak and Daxter games, the Ratchet & Clank games, the Sly Cooper games, God of War 1 and 2, the Mark of Kree, Rise of the Kasai, Fantavision, Frequency, Amplitude, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, Kinetica, Okage Shadow King, and many others that came under your banner. However, from the PlayStation 3 onwards, your output on first-party games have been extremely lacking, as you started to focus more on having more blockbuster games under your label and more third-party games to shine over everything else. Granted, there were some great gems such as the Little Big Planet IP, The Last Guardian, the original Uncharted trilogy, the Resistance games, Heavenly Sword, the Infamous games, Mon Nation Racers, Puppeteer, the new Astro's Playroom, Bloodborne, and Dreams that released on the HD consoles. Unfortunately, they tend to get brushed aside by Sony because you guys are only focused on those 4 developers I previously mentioned, as they are your safest bets to keep your business alive. Microsoft was infamous for only doing that back in the day after Ed Fries left the company, when most of his successors before Phil Spencer took over, and they only just focus on giving more attention to their biggest IPs of Halo, Gears of War, and Fable. They wouldn't even give developers like Rare the benefit of the doubt, because that mentality with just sticking with the safer bets and having them and others focus on the Kinect was what made Microsoft become a laughingstock. When Phil Spencer took the reins, we got to see the future with what he wanted to do for the Xbox brand, and the output from the Xbox division has been far more phenomenal than what people like Steve Ballmer and Don Mattrick were tragically doing. Granted, they still have plenty of hurdles to get over when it comes to their current image with being a console manufacturer mostly delivering for the Western market, but without Phil Spencer being the head of the Xbox division, we wouldn't see so many other games come under his leadership. Games like Sea of Thieves, Cuphead, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, the new Battletoads, and the upcoming Hellblade sequel and the new Perfect Dark game would not be possible if it wasn't for him being very openly minded with giving all the Xbox division's first-party studios the time, the money, and the respect they deserve. Since we're on that part of the subject, let us talk about what both Microsoft and Nintendo does, which Sony completely ignores for the wrong reason. Let's start off with Nintendo. You know about my stance with Nintendo, as they've shown a meteoric rise as a video game company who suffered many hurdles and falls throughout the years. But one man actually did something to set them on the right track than being a company that just cares about big blockbuster games. That one man is Howard Lincoln. And yeah, I know I said in my 2 cents video about the console wars being dumb, where I proclaimed Lincoln as a terrible leader for Nintendo back in the day, but I do give him major respect for not just acknowledging Nintendo as a company who only puts out Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Kirby, and other games that are made back in Japan. Instead, he always felt that Nintendo should also be about identifying new talent and nurturing more creative minds in order for them to be competitive in the video game industry. And that's why he pushed for so many collaborations between them and companies like Rare during the NES, SNES, and Nintendo 64 days. Phil Spencer has that same mindset with what Howard Lincoln did back in the day for Nintendo, and he continues to push out so many different types of games just to keep giving the Xbox install base all viable forms of entertainment non-stop. Not only that, but both Nintendo and Xbox have still been doing that to this very day, and it's all because of one group of people that breathed new life into gaming: independent developers. I'm looking at the list of top 30 games sold on the Nintendo eShop through all games and download-only titles. When it comes to all games, there are only about nearly 30% in the top 30 that are still best-selling when it comes to Nintendo's properties, and they are Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, Animal Crossing New Horizons, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Super Mario Party, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, although that was a Ubisoft-developed and published game, and Pokemon Sword. When looking at the download-only games, there is only one game that is a Nintendo first-party title done by the courtesy of a third-party company, and that is Arcade Archives versus Super Mario Bros. Courtesy of Hamster Corporation. Other than that, nothing else. So many of the other games they have amongst the top 30 in both categories are from third-party partners like Capcom with Monster Hunter Rise and various independent developers such as Innersloth with Among Us, as well as Concerned Ape with Stardew Valley. I don't have an Xbox One or an Xbox Series X, so I can't really tell who's amongst the top sellers on those platforms at this time. However, Phil Spencer has always made a strong effort to appeal to all partners aside from just the first-party divisions amongst the Xbox brand, including the Idea Xbox program, where independent developers can also thrive as well. What is Sony doing to promote themselves? Well, they're promoting their big AAA blockbuster first-party games and promoting big AAA blockbuster third-party games. And it seems that their other first and third-party games, as well as indie developers, are hardly ever promoted at all. It's an unsustainable strategy, and it's still a major problem for the PlayStation brand that hurts them even now. What Jim Ryan is doing for the PlayStation family is the complete opposite to both Nintendo and Microsoft's initiatives in gaming. And it really baffles me how this scenario is more of a repeat with what happened during the early days of the PS3 era. I'm not saying that the definitive blame between the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 5 are the same, but the mindset of an arrogant leader is. Jim Ryan's ego is very identical to Ken Kutaragi's during the PlayStation 3 days that I hardly see anything being said about him as a positive. And the fact that he only relies on Insomniac Games, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios, and Guerrilla Games to deliver on Sony's first-party output does hurt the brand's morale, as creative integrity and acknowledging all groups are completely thrown away. Next up, let us look at the PlayStation 5 itself. Personally, I do like the console for what it is, but I admit that it's not perfect with where it is right now. Ever since news and reveals about the PlayStation 5 started to trickle, Jim Ryan has been very adamant about Sony being only for the next generation of gaming, rather than acknowledging that there's hardly a leap between generations when it comes to many things like visuals, processing power, and other technical aspects to set things apart from each other. Phil Spencer even admitted that's the case with the current ecosystem in console manufacturing and game development. Sure, there may be some differences between a current platform and its predecessor or successor, but the differences are usually minimal at best. On top of that, there aren't that many exclusives to the PlayStation 5 over the PlayStation 4. When Sony launched the PlayStation 5, their biggest games in the first-party side are Spider-Man Miles Morales, Astro's Playroom, which was my favorite launch title that acted more as a technical demo to the DualSense controller, and Sackboy: A Big Adventure. Amongst the third-party side, you have Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, Borderlands 3, Watch Dogs Legion, and even Mortal Kombat 11 Ultimate, to name a few. They were to represent the next generation with what Sony was aiming to do. But guess what? Those games are also available on the PlayStation 4. There is not a game that is exclusive to the PlayStation 5 only, aside from Demon's Souls, but that's a remake of a PlayStation 3 title that isn't anything new or original. The only first-party exclusive that you have coming for the PlayStation 5 in the near future is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, and that game looks great for a PS5 title. One of the only other games I see as a true next-gen title on the PlayStation 5 is Final Fantasy XVI, but we still don't have a release date on that yet, and it's most likely a timed exclusive as it'll end up on the Xbox Series X and PC at some point. What's even more ironic is that only PlayStation 4 games are backwards compatible on the PlayStation 5, so it only makes less sense to release a separate version of each game at retail and through digital storefronts if you can play both versions on the same console. If PlayStation 5 did not have backwards compatibility with the PlayStation 4, then that is when cross-platform delivery would make more sense. But it doesn't if you can play both versions of said game on the same console. Even the free cross-generation upgrades with only having the last-gen disc playable on a next-generation console makes more sense than just having to buy a separate version of a game you already have. As long as you have that option, it should be mandatory instead of being forced to buy a separate version of the same game you already own. Square Enix is doing that for the PS5 version of Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn and the upcoming Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade, and that's a smart business strategy to maintain trust from the consumer. Look, I get that not all companies are immediately jumping the next generation bandwagon because of their reserved behaviors to see if a platform actually sells well or not, but Jim Ryan has not been very faithful to his word, and he is like Sony's equivalent to Peter Molyneux, who is a liar that can't live up to his promises. It's embarrassing when he should be doing far more than just relying on 4 groups to deliver on the PlayStation brand's bottom line from a first-party perspective. Finally, I want to delve a little into Jim Ryan's stance on the PlayStation brand's past legacy and his distaste for the older titles. Ever since he said the words, "Why would anyone play this?" when describing older games like Gran Turismo, Siphon Filter, or even the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon trilogy from back in the day, that statement just showed how divisive and polarizing he is as an individual and as a businessman. I'll tell you that there are those who still play the classics of the PlayStation's back catalog, because that is how they fondly remember the brand for what it is and what it was. I still see people playing those games I mentioned and others, and I even see them live streaming those games to show the younger and more fresh crowd with how incredible they were for their time. Doing that may entice those younger people to try out those games for themselves, because of how unique they look and played, and that is why preservation of classic titles is a big deal for the older and younger audience. Microsoft and Nintendo know that this is true. Even though Super Mario 3D All-Stars is a can of worms I have issues with, I won't delve into that at all. Having those classic games be backwards compatible like on the Xbox consoles, or even through the digital storefronts like on the Nintendo eShop, are still there to give people like me and the younger demographic that option so that they can still play them for the nostalgic and entertainment value. But Sony removing the PS3, PSP, and PlayStation Vita stores in the near future because of Jim Ryan's beliefs is a recipe for disaster. It is slowly but surely making him and the PlayStation brand become even more of a laughingstock, and it is only going to make things worse for Jim Ryan and Sony down the road. Now, all I'm trying to say is that what Jim Ryan has been doing as Sony Interactive Entertainment's president has been nothing short of controversy, and it is still going to fester as long as he continues these ridiculous practices in the future. You may like him for being the current leader of the PlayStation family, but I'm not one of those people. He needs to get his act together and do more right than wrong for the PlayStation brand if he wants to regain the trust of so many people who have been extremely critical of him. Does he have the chance to change for the better? Absolutely. Will he change for the better? Probably not, as long as he continues to stand by his convictions with breaking that social contract towards consumers. It's not right, and it really needs to stop. Jim Ryan, when that day comes and you realized that you made a grave error with what you are doing right now, don't say that we didn't warn you. It'll already be too little too late at that point. Alright guys, that is all of my rant on this subject, and this has me motivated in doing more 2 cents videos in the future. I may do them once a week so that I can continue putting out content on a weekly basis before the bigger projects are released, but don't expect many of them to appear weekly like I have done back in the past. Other than that, I want to hear your 2 cents on this whole situation. Do you agree with me and believe that Jim Ryan is doing more harm than good for the PlayStation brand, or do you see this as a reinvigoration to the brand for something new in the future? Make sure to rate, comment, favorite this video, subscribe, and hit that bell to be notified on future videos coming from yours truly. And I'll see you on the next one. This is Double RPG signing off by saying Godspeed and game on, gamers. Have a good one.